Nell Harper did not beg. She did not cry. She stood on her porch while 3 men waited for her to break. Her carpetbag sat at her feet, too small for a whole life. Nell watched their faces and understood the truth. They were not sending her away. They were erasing her. Boots shifted on the boards. Nell's name was spoken like a warning, not a kindness. Warm lamplight glowed in windows she once visited with pies and stitched hymns. All of it was close enough to touch and still out of reach. Her throat tightened, but she kept still. If a stranger offered her shelter tonight, what would he demand in return? Wyoming Territory, 1875. The cabin at the edge of Larkspur Settlement had once felt like a promise kept. Ben Harper built it with his own hands and a grin that made hard work feel lighter. Nell followed him west from Ohio, carrying books and seed packets in the same trunk. Ben would tap the deed and say it was theirs. Nell believed him. Then the fever came, and it did not bargain. Ben shook under quilts while his skin burned like hot iron. Nell tried cold cloths and bitter tea. She whispered prayers until her throat went raw. She sent a boy for the doctor twice, and twice the boy returned alone. Someone else was sicker, they said. On the third night, Ben's grip on her hand loosened. His eyes found hers, full of apology, and then the light left him. After the burial, the cabin felt too large and too quiet. The winter stores shrank no matter how careful she was. The tax notice came anyway, ink on paper that felt like a threat. Nell sold what she could, one piece at a time. Ben's spare tools went first, then an extra quilt, then her mother's silver pen. As her shelves emptied, the town's smiles thinned. Nell learned to keep her face calm, even when she felt herself cracking inside. The council met in the church because hard decisions like to hide behind scripture. Nell sat on the back bench with her gloves folded tight in her lap. Deacon Harlan spoke in a voice that sounded gentle until you listened close. He said the settlement needed strong homesteads. Ruth Kittich, the doctor's wife, clicked her knitting needles like a clock. Nell said she could manage until spring if they gave her time. Ruth said a woman alone could not run land and should not pretend otherwise. Faces Nell knew stared at her without warmth. The cabin and land would go to the Bear family, men with 4 grown sons. Nell had until sundown to gather her personal things. The church would offer her a ride to Cheyenne the next day, as if hunger could be fixed with a wagon seat. Nell heard the offer and felt cold spread through her chest. Cheyenne meant a workhouse or rooms above a saloon or a marriage chosen by fear. She stood up without thanking anyone. She walked out while their eyes followed her like stones. She packed in silence while the wind pressed against the logs. The wedding ring stayed with her, tied to a ribbon and tucked deep, too precious to trade for flour. Her parents' photograph went into the bag, edges worn soft from being held too often. A small book of poems Ben bought her went in last, his clumsy writing on the first page still warm to her eyes. When Boots thudded on her porch again, Nell did not flinch. Deacon Harlan stood in the doorway with 2 younger men behind him. He did not step inside, he only said it was time. Nell wrapped her thin shawl around her shoulders and stepped into late afternoon. Snow began to fall, slow at first, then thicker, and the wind rose soon after. Behind her, she heard furniture scraping across her floor, and someone laughed as if it was a fine joke. Nell kept walking. She did not look back because she knew if she did, her legs might give up. The road north was empty, then it vanished under drifts. Her boots grew heavy with packed snow. Her fingers went numb inside her gloves, then stopped feeling like they belonged to her. She fell once and bit her lip to keep from crying out. She fell again and heard porcelain crack under her, and she left a teacup behind without even turning to see it. Night came early, thick and white, and every dark shape looked like a lie. Nell thought she saw lights, but they faded when she blinked. She thought she heard voices, but it was only wind sliding over frozen grass. Her thoughts began to tangle, and memories drifted into the storm like smoke. Ben's smile floated up in front of her, gentle as a candle flame. A low hollow opened in the land, and the wind eased for a moment.
Nell stumbled into it like it was a room with walls. Her knees hit the snow, and she did not know if she meant to rest or if her body decided for her. The carpet bag slipped free and spilled open. The photograph lay face up, dusted white, and the book of poems opened like a hand held out. Sleep looked warm, sleep looked kind. Then a steady light moved through the storm, and hooves crunched slow and careful. A horse stepped into view, breath steaming. The rider walked toward her, a lantern swinging in his hand. He knelt, pressed fingers to her throat, and breathed out hard like he had been holding his own breath too. His coat was heavy and fine, but his hands were quick and sure. He pulled that coat off and wrapped it around her, tucking it close, as if he could push warmth into her with will alone. Nell tried to pull away, not from fear of him, but from fear of hope. Her body would not obey. The man lifted her carefully, like she was something fragile that still mattered. Who was this man, and what would he want from her when she woke? The lantern bobbed in the storm as the rider carried Nell out of the hollow. Snow snapped against his coat and melted into dark patches on the wool. Nell felt the hard beat of the horse under her, then the steady arm around her ribs, pulling her upright. She tried to open her eyes, but the cold kept dragging the lids down. The rider kept talking, not loud, just constant, like he was afraid silence would finish her. He heard him whisper, "Stay with me," like he refused to let her fade. The last thing she remembered was the sound of a gate latch and the rider saying, "Home." As if the word could warm her, light appeared through the white, steady and golden in a way the storm could not fake. A ranch house stood ahead, with smoke lifting from a chimney and windows glowing like hearths. The horse pushed forward, hooves crunching through drifts, and the rider slid down before the animal fully stopped. Nell was lifted again, wrapped tighter in his heavy coat, and carried toward an open door. Heat rolled out and hit her face, and her skin stung as feeling tried to return. A woman's voice snapped, sharp with alarm, and then the door slammed behind them, and the storm became only a sound. The woman who took charge had iron gray hair and eyes like a clear winter sky. She said her name was Mabel Pruitt, and she spoke like a person who did not waste time with panic. She ordered fresh snow in a basin and blankets warmed by the fire. The man obeyed fast, moving with the quiet speed of someone used to responsibility. Nell heard Mabel say, "Slow warming, not fast, or we lose fingers and toes," and the words chilled her more than the wind had. Snow pressed into Nell's palms and around her feet, and the pain brought her back to the world in harsh waves. She woke again in a clean bed under thick quilts, the room smelling of soap and pine smoke. Her hands were wrapped in cloth and ointment, and her feet ached deep like bruises inside the bones. The fire in the hearth was smaller now, steady and safe, and a cup clanked somewhere close. Hot chocolate smint drifted over her, rich and sweet, and it made her throat tighten. Mabel sat in a chair with knitting in her lap, watching Nell the way you watch a skittish horse. Nell forced words out past a dry mouth and asked where she was. "Mercer Ranch, a day's ride from Larkspur, and you're in the blue room," Mabel said, holding the cup steady. Nell drank, and the warmth spread through her like a slow thaw. She watched Mabel's face, hunting for judgment, for a sharp edge, for a lecture about gratitude. All she found was tired kindness and a calm that didn't ask for anything back. Nell swallowed hard and asked why they would help her. Mabel's needles paused, and she said, "A person does not leave another to die in the snow." Then she tucked the blanket under her chin as if the matter was settled. The man stood in the doorway, not stepping in until Mabel nodded. He was broad in the shoulders, with a scar cutting through one eyebrow, and brown eyes that held steady. "Caleb Mercer," he said, touching the brim of his hat, like manners still mattered, and then he stopped, as if he didn't want to push. Nell studied him from behind the quilt, searching for the price of his kindness. Caleb said he found her in the storm and brought her home because leaving her there was wrong. Nell asked what he wanted in return, and Caleb shook his head once. By the end of the week, Nell could stand and shuffle to a chair by the window. She watched ranch hands haul hay and men tack, their faces red from cold, their movements sure. Caleb spoke to them with quiet respect, and they answered him the same, not fearfully, but loyal. Mabel kept Nell busy in small ways, folding cloth and shelling beans, keeping her mind from sliding back into the hollow. One morning, Caleb brought Nell's carpet bag, dried and stitched where the seam had split. Inside were her little Bible and the faded photograph of her parents. The picture was bent at one corner, yet the faces still looked kind, and Nell held it like a promise. On the 8th day, Caleb set a thick ledger on the table beside Nell's chair. He said Mabel told him Nell liked books, and books meant numbers might not scare her. Nell opened the ledger and saw columns that didn't quite add right, small mistakes that could bleed a ranch dry over time. She pointed one out before she could stop herself.